Hey everyone, I'm Natalie Williams. I'm 28 now, and after 5 long years away, I was finally driving back to the place I once called home. My hands were sweaty on the steering wheel as I turned onto the familiar road that led to my parents' house. In the back seat, a garment bag holding something that would change everything, my Colonel insignia. Yeah, Colonel. But my family didn't know that yet. See, growing up, they always brushed off my military career like it was a detour from the real world. It never mattered how hard I worked, how far I climbed, they just never took it seriously. But that was about to change. Tomorrow, my father's company, Pinnacle Defense Systems, was hosting a huge event. The CEO herself would be there. And so would I. Not just as family, but as the Pentagon's appointed liaison firm for a $1.2 billion defense contract. Before we dive into how that played out, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your city in the comments. And while you're at it, hit like and subscribe. Trust me, if your family has ever underestimated you, you're going to feel this story in your soul. The moment I stepped through the front door, it felt like I had entered a time capsule. Nothing had changed. The same faded pictures along the hallway, the same beat-up couch in the living room. Even the curtains, those mustard-colored things my mom swore gave the house character, were still clinging to the windows. "Natalie, you made it," my mom called from the kitchen. No hug, no greeting at the door. Just the usual voice, that quiet layer of disappointment underneath every word she spoke to me. My brother Gregory, he always got the big welcomes. Me, just an afterthought. I set my bag down and walked slowly through the house, running my fingers along the old wood banister, the scuffed furniture, the pictures of Gregory in his suit posing at company events. My dad, Albert, had spent 30 years climbing the ladder at Pinnacle, from engineer to senior executive. The whole family revolved around that success story, and of course, Gregory was next in line. When I walked into the kitchen, my mom didn't miss a beat. "Your brother will be here soon," she said, stirring something on the stove. "He just got promoted again, senior project manager now." "That's great," I replied. The words came out flat, robotic, after years of pretending it didn't bother me. Then she went on, as she always did, talking about Gregory and his wife, Megan, their new house, his new title, the parties they hosted, every single highlight like she was reading from a press release. Not once did she ask what I'd been doing. Not once did she mention my service. Eventually, I excused myself and went upstairs to my old bedroom. Just like the rest of the house, it hadn't changed either. Cheerleading trophies still lined the shelf. My college acceptance letters were still tacked to the bulletin board. It was like they had frozen time right before I made what they called my mistake. The day I told them I was accepting a scholarship from the Reserve Officer Development Corps, you'd think I had announced I was joining the circus. My father's words still echo in my head. "The military is for people who don't have other options, Natalie. You're smarter than that." They had already mapped out my future at Pinnacle, but I had chosen a different path, and they never forgave me for it. I unzipped my suitcase and pulled out the garment bag. Inside was my dress uniform, clean, pressed, and ready. Tomorrow was the leadership conference at Pinnacle, and the CEO, Shannon Murphy, would be there. What my family didn't know was that I wasn't just tagging along. I was the military liaison overseeing their entire contract. I carefully hung the uniform in the back of the closet, behind a row of forgotten jackets and old dresses. Tonight, I'd sit through another family dinner where no one asked me anything about my life. But tomorrow, they'd see. The doorbell rang. Gregory had arrived. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders like I was heading into combat, and headed downstairs. The dining room felt smaller than I remembered, or maybe it just felt more cramped with the weight of expectations. My brother Gregory stood tall in his designer button-down, Megan at his side looking every bit the polished corporate wife. And of course, Cousin Tiffany was already there, sipping wine with a calm grace that only someone successful and aware of it could manage. "Natalie, you remember Tiffany?" my mom asked, as if we didn't grow up together. "She just closed a multi-million-dollar deal for her bank." "Hey, Tiffany," I said with a smile. And to be fair, she smiled back with warmth. "It's been too long." "It really has, Nat," she replied, pulling me in for a hug. Say what you will, Tiffany never judged me, even if she didn't get my career path. Dinner started with polite chatter. The smell of baked chicken and mashed potatoes filled the room, but the tension was the real seasoning. Gregory, not one to waste time, leaned toward our dad. "So, I wanted to tell you about the new project I'm heading up," he said, with a bit too much flair. "Shannon picked me herself to lead it." My father beamed. "That's my boy. Shannon Murphy doesn't just hand out leadership roles. You must have really impressed her." Gregory nodded proudly. "It's the same project I've been working on for months. She said my perspective could help move it forward faster." I took a slow sip of water. The same project he was talking about? That was my project, the one I now had complete authority over. He had no idea. My mom leaned in. "Tell them about your staff, sweetheart." Gregory puffed up. 12 direct reports. 2 of them are senior engineers who've been there since the 90s. They weren't thrilled to report to someone younger, but they came around. "That's wonderful," my mom cooed, and then she turned to me with a too sweet smile. "How's your job going, Natalie? Still at the same rank?" She said job like it was a hobby, like I was still volunteering for bake sales. "It's going well," I said, keeping it neutral. No way I was giving away the surprise. "Still a captain or something?" my dad asked, waving his fork vaguely in the air like military ranks were alphabet soup. "Something like that," I replied, cutting into my food. "Oh, and Tiffany just bought a gorgeous condo downtown," my mom added, not so subtly shifting the conversation again. 3 bedrooms, mountain views. Tiffany looked visibly uncomfortable. "It's really not that big of a deal," she offered, trying to be modest. "It's a huge step," my mom insisted. "It's good to see young people settling down, building something solid, unlike, well..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Everyone at the table knew what she meant. I'd moved around for 8 years, 4 states, 2 countries, a lifestyle my mother called unstable behind my back and sometimes to my face. Then thank God my dad changed the subject. "So tomorrow's a big day," he said. "The CEO's visiting our branch, Shannon Murphy herself. That almost never happens." "I already have my presentation finished." Gregory chimed in. "Shannon even emailed me directly, said she's excited about my proposal." "Oh?" I asked innocently. "Is there anything special planned?" "Full staff meeting, project reviews, and a special announcement about the military contract," my dad replied. "Some colonel from the Pentagon's supposed to show up, but I doubt they'll send someone high-ranking. Probably just a major who wants a tour." I had to choke down a laugh. "That'll be interesting," I said, my voice perfectly level. "Not really," Gregory scoffed. "Military people don't really get the business side. They just follow rules and collect paychecks." Tiffany frowned. "Greg, come on, that's not fair." But he was on a roll. "Let's be honest," he said. "The military is a fallback. People who can't make it in the real world go there to hide behind ranks." "Gregory," I said, careful to keep my tone even, "what exactly do you think I do? Push papers? Attend training? I don't know," he shrugged. "Important work, sure, but it's not like you're running anything." "You'll still be taking orders 10 years from now," he added with a chuckle, "while I'll be running a division." It stung, more than I wanted it to. I'd spent years telling myself their opinions didn't matter. But sitting there in my parents' dining room, it all came rushing back. Every overlooked promotion, every ignored award, every time they acted like I had failed by not wearing a suit to work. Tiffany tried to cut in. "I think Natalie made a choice that works for her." My mom sighed like I had been a tragedy. "It's just such a waste. You were supposed to be the one who took over at Pinnacle. Remember when all your teachers said you could run a company someday?" I stared at my plate, barely hearing the rest of the conversation. Gregory's vacation to Hawaii, Megan's promotion at the law firm, Tiffany's investment success. No one asked about my last deployment. No one asked about my unit. Or the simulation systems I'd helped develop that were now standard across multiple divisions of the Army. But when dessert came around, my dad brought the topic back to what really mattered, to him. "Tomorrow could be big for me," he said. "This contract might finally push me into the VP spot." I nodded. "Sounds important." He had no idea. That night, I lay in my childhood bed, fingers brushing the fabric of my colonel insignia. The same ceiling stars still glowed above me, leftovers from a time when my potential had a different shape. When I still thought I had to earn their approval. But tomorrow? Tomorrow wasn't about approval. It was about showing them who I had become. And I was ready. The next morning, the house was already stirring by the time I rolled out of bed. I could hear my parents downstairs, talking in that clipped, overeager tone they used whenever something important was happening. Gregory was in the shower across the hall, probably rehearsing his talking points for the CEO. I got dressed quietly, slipping into my uniform with practiced precision. The deep midnight blue, the polished insignia, the ribbons, the medals, every piece placed exactly where it belonged. I pinned my hair up regulation style and took one last look in the mirror. What stared back wasn't a daughter, desperate for validation. It was Colonel Natalie Williams, confident, prepared, and walking into that building not as family, but as the highest-ranking authority on the most critical project Pinnacle had ever undertaken. I waited until I heard both my parents' and Gregory's cars leave the driveway before stepping out. The drive to Pinnacle Defense Systems took only about 15 minutes, just long enough for me to review some final briefing notes in my mind. This was about more than family drama. This was national security. When I pulled into the designated spot, the sign said, "Military Liaison, Reserved." A tiny smirk tugged at my lips. They had no idea. At the entrance, the security guard stood a little straighter when I approached. The one nearest saluted. "Good morning, Colonel. Identification, please." I handed him my badge and Pentagon clearance file. "Colonel Natalie Williams, here for Project Aegis review." The guard blinked. Clearly, he hadn't been expecting someone my age or my gender. "Yes, ma'am, you're cleared. Would you like an escort to the conference floor?" "No need," I replied smoothly. "I've studied the layout." I walked through the security checkpoint with a sense of calm I'd only ever known on the battlefield. People paused as I passed, some nodding politely, others just staring. High-ranking officers didn't usually show up to regional offices, let alone young ones. When I reached the elevator, I braced myself for what was coming. The executive floor lit up as I pressed the button. Ding. Doors opened, and there he was, Gregory, tablet in hand, brow furrowed, completely engrossed, until he looked up and saw me. His eyes widened. "Natalie? What is that? Why are you in uniform?" I smiled, professional and calm. "Good morning, Gregory. I'm here for the project review." He looked me up and down, like I was an illusion. That's when my father turned the corner, chatting with two men from legal and engineering. His eyes landed on me and froze. "Natalie, what the hell is going on?" he hissed, glancing around nervously. "Why are you in uniform?" "Here." I straightened my posture. "I'm heading into the conference room. Meeting starts in 20 minutes. One of the men with him, Barbara Jenkins, according to her name badge, stepped forward with surprise and immediate respect. "Colonel, it's an honor. We weren't informed you'd be attending in person." My father paled. "Colonel," he repeated, like the word didn't make sense. I gave him a small, cordial nod. "CEO Murphy will explain everything shortly." I walked away without another word, heels clicking confidently down the corridor. Behind me, murmurs broke out. I didn't look back. Inside the conference room, the setup was already underway. Projector screens, notepads, neatly arranged refreshments. One of the assistants nearly dropped a tray when she saw me. "Oh, Colonel, ma'am, we didn't realize. Is everything all right? Do you need special arrangements?" "No, thank you," I replied, taking the seat labeled Military Liaison. "Everything looks fine." The room slowly filled. Executives, managers, engineers, all entering with the easy confidence of people used to being the smartest ones in the room, until they saw me. And then I saw it, the subtle shift. Postures straightened, voices dropped, eyes lingered. I wasn't who they expected. And that was the point. Gregory entered a few minutes later, his steps uncertain, his confidence clearly shaken. He sat far from me, and every so often he stole glances like he was trying to figure out if this was some elaborate prank. At exactly 9 a.m., the doors opened, and in walked Shannon Murphy. Now Shannon, she's a legend. Sharp as a blade, known for her directness, and the kind of presence that could make a whole room go silent. She scanned the table, then her eyes landed on me. Instant recognition, a smile. "Well," she said, walking directly toward me. "Colonel Williams, this is a surprise. We were scheduled for a video call." I stood to shake her hand. "I was in town visiting family. Thought it might be helpful to attend in person." "Excellent initiative," she said warmly. "This will make everything much smoother." Then she turned to the room. "For those unaware, this is Colonel Natalie Williams, our Pentagon liaison for Project Aegis. She holds final approval authority over all specifications and strategic direction. You could hear the oxygen leave the room. Across the table, my father's jaw had literally dropped. Gregory looked like he was watching his whole worldview implode in real time. "Colonel," Shannon continued, "thank you for being here. We look forward to your insights." And just like that, the meeting began. Every department gave their updates, each one now including me in their remarks. When questions about defense system integration or compliance protocols came up, all eyes turned to me. I answered calmly, concisely, like someone who had spent years living this work. And I didn't need notes. I didn't need backup. I was the authority in the room. And the longer I spoke, the more it showed. Gregory's turn came. He stood, cleared his throat, and tried to launch into his presentation. But his voice wavered. His gaze flickered over to me again and again. "As lead for UI integration, I've proposed a new streamlining protocol that..." He faltered. "Please continue, Mr. Williams," I said evenly, like I would with any other presenter. He stumbled through, clearly off balance. When he finished, I leaned forward. "I do have a few technical concerns," I said, "particularly with the proposed cross-system authentication logic. There are some redundancies and potential vulnerabilities you haven't addressed." I wasn't being petty. I wasn't trying to humiliate him. But this was my job. These systems mattered. The stakes were high. "These need to be revised before we can move forward," I concluded. "Submit the updates by end of week." Gregory nodded, pale and tight-lipped. Across the room, my father sat frozen. He was watching his son get called to task by the daughter he once said was wasting her potential. As the meeting wore on, respect grew. It was subtle but unmistakable. Nods, agreement, genuine engagement. My reputation wasn't just military polish, it was earned. When the final slide clicked off, Shannon stood to close the session. "Colonel Williams will remain on site for the next 2 days," she announced. "She'll be conducting security assessments and reviewing team performance. Please give her your full cooperation." The room emptied slowly, people still digesting what they'd just seen. Shannon approached me again. "You're exactly what this project needs," she said. "General Grant spoke very highly of you. Now I see why." Just over her shoulder, I noticed my father, standing there, hesitating. He wanted to speak. He just didn't know how. The conference room began to clear, a steady stream of executives and department heads drifting out, murmuring among themselves. They tried to pretend they weren't glancing at me as they passed, but they were. Whispers floated through the air like smoke. "Did you know Albert's daughter was Colonel Williams? No wonder she's the liaison. Impressive." "Wait, that's his daughter? That Colonel Williams?" From across the room, I saw Shannon beckon me. "Colonel Williams, let me introduce you to the rest of the executive team. Some of them know your name from reports and briefings, but it's always good to connect in person." I joined her, professional but composed. She placed a hand on my shoulder as she introduced me. Something small, but in corporate culture, a gesture that spoke volumes. "Everyone, this is Colonel Natalie Williams, the Pentagon's primary liaison for Project Aegis. She's the one who's been signing off on the frameworks we're building." The VP of Engineering, Thomas Bailey, stepped forward. "Colonel, your paper on quantum-resilient infrastructure blew our team away. We've already adapted 3 of your protocols." "Appreciate that," I said. "We designed them for active engagement threats, but I'm glad to see they're scaling in your architecture." Out of the corner of my eye, I could see my father standing a few feet back, unsure whether to approach. Gregory hovered nearby, expression caught somewhere between disbelief and discomfort. Shannon continued making introductions, connecting the dots between me and the high-level decision-making that had, until now, felt remote to them. When she finally turned toward my father, her tone shifted slightly, part recognition, part surprise. "And of course, you must know Albert Williams, our Director of Regional Operations. He's been with Pinnacle for nearly 30 years. There was a beat of silence. Then she tilted her head slightly. "Wait, Williams, are you too related?" I opened my mouth to respond diplomatically, but my father stepped forward. "She's my daughter," he said. The room froze for a second, just long enough for everyone to register what he'd just said. Shannon's eyes widened. "Your daughter? Albert, you never mentioned," he stammered. "I didn't know. We hadn't spoken in detail about her role." Shannon turned to me. "You never told us you were related to Albert." My family and I haven't had many opportunities to talk about my current position, I said simply, keeping it professional. Gregory suddenly blurted out, "Wait, you're the Colonel Williams everyone's been talking about? The one with final approval over everything?" "Yes," I said, meeting his eyes. "I've been overseeing Project Aegis for about 6 months now." 6 months? My father echoed, the number like a punch to the gut. "You've been a colonel for 6 months and you didn't say anything?" Shannon, now visibly trying to navigate the awkward family dynamic, nodded. "Well, this is certainly unexpected, but since you're here, Colonel, would you be willing to walk us through your direct oversight on the project?" "Of course," I replied, already stepping toward the screen. "Happy to clarify." I pulled up the presentation on the display, a complete breakdown of Project Aegis. Objectives, timelines, milestones, risk assessments. I spoke clearly and confidently, each point underpinned by months of specialized work, not to mention years of preparation and experience. As the military liaison, I have direct authority over all deliverables. I sign off on technical integrations, personnel approvals, and performance metrics. I let that sink in before continuing. "This includes staffing decisions." Gregory visibly stiffened. I wasn't trying to embarrass him, but facts were facts. When I finished, Shannon turned to the room. "Let's be very clear," she said. "Colonel Williams isn't just here to consult. She's the linchpin of this entire operation. If she doesn't sign off, nothing moves forward. Her authority is full and final." There was no room for interpretation. From the corner, I could see Gregory turning pale. Shannon added, "And over the next 2 days, Colonel Williams will be conducting performance evaluations of all team leads. That includes UI, systems, engineering, and compliance." Gregory didn't say a word, but I saw his jaw tighten. Yesterday, he was bragging about leading a team of engineers. Today, I'd be reviewing his metrics, his deadlines, and his management outcomes. As the room began to empty again, Shannon pulled me aside. "I had no idea Albert was your father," she said. "This must be a proud moment for him." I gave a small smile. "It's a significant moment, certainly." She nodded. "Well, he should be proud. Your work's been stellar. I've said that for months." I heard the footsteps before I saw them, my father approaching. There was something different in his walk, not the usual confidence, something closer to hesitation. "Natalie," he started. "Colonel Williams," I corrected gently, knowing exactly what I was doing. He looked wounded for a second, then composed himself. "We need to talk." "Of course. I have a meeting with the security team, but I can be in your office at 1100 hours. He blinked at the phrasing so formal, so exact, but nodded. "Right. 11. As I walked past him, I heard a murmur from the hallway. "Did you know she refused any family connections to get the assignment?" No strings, just merit. That last voice, Thomas Bailey. And my father heard it. He paused mid-step, lips pressed together. It was finally starting to register. I hadn't gotten here because of him. I'd gotten here in spite of him. At exactly 11 a.m., I knocked on the frosted glass door of my father's office. Inside, I could see not just him, but my mother and Gregory too. Someone had clearly made a phone call after the meeting. "Enter," my father called. I stepped in, posture straight, uniform crisp, every inch the officer they never saw coming. My mother sat perched on the edge of a guest chair, her hands clenched in her lap. Gregory was standing by the window, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "Have a seat," my father offered. "I prefer to stand," I said smoothly, clasping my hands behind my back. It was a simple statement, but it set the tone. This wasn't a family visit. This was a debriefing. There was silence for a few long seconds. Then my father broke it. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked, voice low, almost hollow. "All this time we thought—" "You thought I was wasting my potential," I replied, "that I wasn't doing anything that mattered." "We didn't know," my mother chimed in. "You never told us." "I did," I said. "I sent invitations to every promotion ceremony. I called after new assignments. I emailed articles when my work was public enough to share." She looked at Gregory like maybe he could corroborate. He didn't say anything. "But a colonel," my father muttered. That's a very high rank." "It is," I said. "Roughly equivalent to a vice president in corporate structure." That hit him. His spine straightened, and for the first time, I saw something like comprehension spark in his eyes. "And you're over our contract?" Gregory asked, stepping forward. "The whole thing?" "Yes," I answered. all $1.2 billion of it. I have sign-off authority on staffing, budget allocations, technical specs, everything. You came home now just to embarrass us in front of Shannon? He accused. I kept my expression neutral. I came home because I haven't seen you in 5 years. The fact that the project review happened to be this week, that was coincidence. Convenient, yes, but not planned. My father stood abruptly. You showed up in uniform at my company. People are going to think I pulled strings to get you assigned. I actually laughed. I've spent my entire career avoiding this company's shadow. General Grant assigned me to this project because of my record and expertise. She doesn't know you. She doesn't care. General Grant? My mother asked softly. My commanding officer, I replied, and my mentor. She saw in me what you never did. She supported my career, challenged me, believed in me. That landed like a slap. So this was revenge, Gregory snapped. Some big I told you so. You wanted to humiliate us. No, I said quietly. This isn't about you. This is about doing my job. A job I've trained for, earned, and excelled at. Your refusal to take it seriously? That's on you. My father's voice rose. You let us think you were still pushing paper, that you were stuck somewhere, some junior officer buried in logistics. Would it have mattered? I asked. When has anyone in this room ever shown real interest in my work? Last night, all you asked about was Gregory's promotion and Tiffany's condo. You didn't ask me a single question. No one spoke. We always wanted what was best for you, my mom offered. No, I corrected gently. You wanted what was familiar, what made sense to you. The moment I chose something different, you stopped listening. My father sat heavily back into his chair, hands folded, brow furrowed. Gregory followed the path we had planned, he said. I know, I said, and I'm happy for him, but that was never my path. Gregory dropped his arms, his stance finally softening. All these years, we thought you just stayed in place. I know what you thought, I said. You made it clear every chance you got. Gregory exhaled. I didn't know. You never asked, I replied. My mother stood abruptly, voice shaky. Well, now we do know, and we're proud. I always told your father the military was a noble path. Mom, I interrupted gently. Please don't. Don't rewrite it now. Let's just be honest. She blinked, as if unsure how to respond to a daughter who no longer needed her validation. My father cleared his throat. Natalie, he said, and I noticed the shift. Not Colonel, not young lady, just my name. What do you want from us? An apology? Recognition? What I've always wanted, I said. Respect. Acknowledgement that my path, though different, mattered. That it was enough. Silence again, but this time it didn't feel defensive. It felt heavy. Finally, my father stood and walked over. He didn't hug me. That's not who he is. Instead, he extended his hand. Colonel Williams, he said, voice tight, I owe you an apology, a big one. I dismissed your career because I didn't understand it, and I was wrong. I took his hand. For the first time in years, it didn't feel like a negotiation. It felt like recognition. Thank you, I said. He nodded slowly. I still don't get all the technical stuff, but if you're willing, I'd like to learn. Something loosened in my chest. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't dared to. I'd like that, I said. My mother stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable but trying. We should have gone to your ceremonies, she said quietly. I would have liked to see you be honored. It was the closest to an apology she could offer. I nodded. Thank you. Gregory finally walked over, looking me square in the eyes. So, you outrank me by a lot. This isn't a competition, Greg. It always felt like one, he admitted. Mom and Dad made sure of that. But after what I saw today, I get it now. I could never do what you do. That honesty, it meant more than any ceremony. Thank you, I said. Dad cleared his throat again. Shannon wants to have dinner tonight, with all of us. She's impressed, Natalie. Genuinely. I know, I said, allowing a small smile. You probably know more about this company than I do, he said. Only the classified parts, I replied. He actually laughed. For the first time in, maybe ever, we shared a moment without friction. Things weren't healed. Not yet. Maybe never completely. But something had changed, and it was real. I have another meeting, I said, checking my watch. But I'd be happy to join you all for dinner tonight. As I turned to leave, my mother called out. Natalie, She couldn't find the words. I know, Mom, I said gently. One step at a time. I closed the door behind me. They had always thought I was nothing. Now they finally saw who I was. Not a disappointment. Not a detour. Colonel Natalie Williams. and I had earned every inch of it. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my apartment in Washington, D.C., pulling a tray of roasted vegetables out of the oven. My unit had shipped out that morning for a 3-month exercise overseas, but tonight, I wasn't on duty. I was hosting my family for dinner. That in itself was something I never imagined would happen. The apartment was modern, minimalist, and full of light. 2 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows with a stunning view of the Potomac. The kind of place that screamed independence and stability. Not that I had anything to prove anymore. This was my space, my sanctuary. The doorbell rang. When I opened it, my father stood on the other side, holding a large, professionally framed news article. I thought you might want a copy, he said, offering it to me like it was a peace treaty. It was the story from Defense Times. Colonel Williams leads Aegis launch. $1.2 billion cybersecurity contract rolled out ahead of schedule. The photo showed me standing between General Eleanor Grant and Shannon Murphy, all of us in uniform or suits, shaking hands at the Pentagon. I smiled genuinely. Thanks, Dad. That's thoughtful. He gave a small shrug, but I could tell it meant something to him. This same man who once said ranks didn't mean anything now had that article framed and hung in his office. My mother arrived next, carrying a homemade apple pie, the same one she used to bake when I was 10, a childhood favorite. I thought you might still like this, she said, carefully placing it on the counter. I do, I said. She looked around the apartment. It's lovely, Natalie. So neat, organized. Military precision, I joked, and to my surprise, she laughed. Gregory and Megan showed up last, arms full with an expensive bottle of wine and a 6-pack of some craft cider with labels I couldn't pronounce. Gregory whistled as he stepped in. This place is a whole vibe, very tactical chic. I'll take that as a compliment, I smirked. He raised the wine. For dinner. And, for saving the country's data infrastructure or whatever. We laughed, but there was truth in it. He meant it. Later, as we settled into the living room, Gregory plopped onto the couch and leaned forward. So, I implemented that protocol you suggested last month. The one with the access gate rotation? The team thinks I'm a genius. I arched a brow. Did you give credit where credit was due? He grinned. Eventually. I soaked in the praise for 5 minutes, then confessed. But seriously, it worked. The integration went smoother than we expected. You've got a strong team, I said. They execute well. He straightened up like I just handed him a medal. Thanks. That means a lot. And I could tell it really did. He wasn't just my brother now. He was starting to see me as a peer. While we chatted, my father wandered over to the bookshelf where I had some modest displays. Nothing flashy, just my commissioning photo, a few ribbons, challenge coins, and a shadow box with my colonel insignia. You designed a system that stopped an attack last year, right? He asked. Still scanning the display, I nodded, caught it before it breached phase 2. We were lucky. Lives at stake? He asked. Potentially. If they'd gotten further, yes, it could have been disastrous. He was quiet for a second. I always thought the military was about tanks, boots on the ground. I never imagined this kind of battlefield. Most people don't, I said, and that's why we're effective, because they don't see us coming. The doorbell rang again. This time, when I opened it, I was greeted by Brigadier General Eleanor Grant. She was off duty, but she still carried herself like she was in full uniform. She stepped in, offered a warm smile, and extended her hand. Colonel Williams? General, I said with a grin. Thanks for joining us. Eleanor had always been more than just a mentor. She was the reason I had pushed forward when everything else made me question my choices. Inside, I made the introductions. This is Brigadier General Eleanor Grant, my CO and mentor. My father stood immediately and extended his hand like he was meeting a Fortune 500 CEO. General Grant, it's a pleasure. I've heard a lot. Eleanor returned the handshake firmly. The pleasure's mine. Your daughter has been one of the most exceptional officers I've worked with in over 30 years of service. My mother was already setting the table. Please, General, make yourself at home. Dinner's almost ready. We moved into the dining room. The conversation flowed naturally. Eleanor shared stories from the field, explained the scale of cybersecurity in today's military world, carefully avoiding classified topics, of course. She said at one point, gesturing to me, Natalie designed a training simulation that's now being used by every unit in our division. Cut breach success in exercises by over 60%. My father blinked. That's incredible. We didn't know, my mother said quietly. All these years, we just didn't know. You never asked, I replied. But there wasn't bitterness in it, just truth. Now they knew. And that mattered. After dinner, while clearing plates, Gregory leaned over to me at the sink. You know, he said, I used to think I was winning. Promotions, corporate perks, but you were playing a completely different game, one I couldn't even see. It was never a competition, Greg. I know, he said, but I made it one, and I'm sorry. We washed the rest in silence, a comfortable silence. Later, coffee and pie in hand, my father raised his glass. To Colonel Natalie Williams, he said, voice filled with pride I hadn't heard before, who reminded us that choosing your own path can lead to extraordinary places, even when others don't see it at first. We all clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt peace. Their approval wasn't my validation anymore, but their recognition, that was healing. That night, after everyone had gone home and the dishes were done, I sat alone on the balcony of my apartment. The lights of Washington, D.C. sparkled below like a silent city of stars. It was the kind of evening where everything felt still, not empty, but whole. I wrapped my hands around a warm mug of chamomile tea and exhaled, long and slow. 6 months ago, I'd walked into that conference room as Colonel Natalie Williams. Tonight, for the first time, I was just Natalie. And that was enough. That quiet moment reminded me how far I had come, not just in rank, not in medals or mission credits, but in the battle for my own identity. The girl who once sat silently at family dinners, shrinking under layers of judgment and misunderstanding, had become a woman who commanded rooms, handled billion-dollar contracts, and stood her ground, not out of defiance, but out of clarity. And yet, none of it had been about revenge. I hadn't built my career to prove them wrong. I'd built it because I knew deep down that this was where I was supposed to be. But getting here hadn't been easy. In the early years of my military career, I often questioned if I'd made a mistake. There were days I was bone-tired, buried under regulations and chain-of-command protocol, surrounded by people who didn't look like me or think like me. But I pushed through. I trained harder, studied longer, listened closely, and found people who saw me, not who they wanted me to be, but who I was. Eleanor Grant had been one of the first. Back when I was a second lieutenant, she noticed me during a grueling multi-day systems training. I was the only woman in the group, and the youngest by a solid 5 years. Half the team ignored me. The other half resented me. Eleanor didn't say much at first. She just watched, observed how I caught patterns others missed, how I solved problems through strategy rather than brute force. After one particular simulation, where I rerouted an entire defensive network in record time, she pulled me aside. You think differently, she said. That's going to take you places. And it did. Under her guidance, I rose faster than I ever imagined. I went from lieutenant to captain to major in record time. When I was selected to lead the task force that uncovered a cyber attack in progress, a real threat, not just some training exercise, it was Eleanor who made sure the right people noticed. And when she became brigadier general, she brought me along with her, not as a favor, but because she trusted me to deliver. That trust became the foundation for everything that followed. It was Eleanor who recommended me for the Aegis contract oversight. She knew the stakes, knew the technology, knew I was ready. What she didn't know, what I hadn't told anyone, was how personal this project was for me. Pinnacle wasn't just another defense contractor, it was my family's company, the place where my father had built his reputation. The place that had loomed over my childhood like a legacy I had failed to inherit. When I first read the contract's details, saw that Pinnacle would be the lead tech developer, my stomach dropped. For a moment, I debated turning it down. I didn't want the drama, the old wounds, the history, but Eleanor's voice echoed in my mind. You think differently. I realized then maybe that was exactly what the project needed. Not someone chasing legacy, but someone defining one on their own terms. The day I accepted the assignment, I promised myself one thing. I wouldn't seek their validation. If they noticed me, great. If they didn't, I would still do the job. But what I didn't anticipate was how much they would change. After the conference, my father began reaching out, not with guilt, but with curiosity. He sent me articles, asked questions, shared stories from his own early days as an engineer. Gregory called weekly, sometimes with work questions, sometimes just to talk. He even mentioned applying for a cybersecurity certificate so he could better understand the systems his team worked with. My mother? Well, she tried. She still talked a little too much about Megan's new car or Tiffany's investments, but there was something gentler now, less comparison, more effort. She even started asking what it was like to live overseas, to be deployed, to lead teams. They were learning, and for the first time in a long time, I was willing to let them. The next morning, I met Eleanor for coffee at our favorite spot a few blocks from the Pentagon. We sat at the patio table, both in civilian clothes. For once, we weren't colleagues, just two women catching up. "You handled that dinner well," she said, sipping her espresso. "Did I?" I smiled. I was half expecting someone to throw mashed potatoes. Eleanor chuckled. "I've seen generals fall apart in less pressure." I grew serious for a moment. "Thank you for seeing me. Back then, before I even saw myself." She set her cup down and met my eyes. "Natalie," she said, "you didn't need me to see you. You've always had what it takes. I just made sure the world didn't miss it." That stuck with me, because the truth is, we all need someone like that. Someone who doesn't try to change us, but champions us exactly as we are. Later that afternoon, I got a message from Shannon Murphy. "Dinner next week? Bring Eleanor. I want to hear more about that new intrusion detection framework. Also, how's your family doing?" It was short, casual, but it meant something. Shannon, the CEO of one of the most powerful defense firms in the country, didn't just see me as a contractor anymore. She saw me as a partner, and she saw my family not as an embarrassing footnote, but as a bridge we'd finally started rebuilding. I forwarded the message to Eleanor with a grin and started thinking about what I'd wear. I wasn't in uniform for this one. Just Natalie. Just me. And for once, that was more than enough. A week later, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting the neckline of my blouse. Not a uniform this time, but a tailored navy blue top paired with sleek black trousers. Professional, confident, but unmistakably civilian. Dinner with Shannon Murphy was on the agenda. She'd invited both me and Eleanor to join her and a few select members of Pinnacle's board at a private venue downtown. Technically, it was a working dinner, a strategy discussion. But I knew it was also something else. A message. A statement of alignment between the military and the private sector. And whether Shannon would ever say it aloud or not, a statement that included me at the table. When Eleanor arrived to pick me up, she gave me a once-over and nodded approvingly. "Not a single medal in sight. And still terrifying," she teased. I smirked. "Good, I'm trying to keep my reputation." We stepped into the quiet hum of Washington's elite dining circle, a soft-lit room with polished silver, navy drapes, and conversation pitched just above a whisper. Shannon stood near the head of the long table, her posture as polished as the crystal stemware. "Colonel, Natalie," she corrected herself mid-greeting. "I'm glad you came." I shook her hand. Wouldn't miss it. Dinner began with pleasantries, mentions of recent contracts, defense trends, workforce transitions. But it didn't take long before the real conversation kicked in. "We've been refining our Phase 2 proposal for Aegis," Shannon said, glancing between Eleanor and me. "Our internal team has proposed a hybrid framework, but to be candid, we want your input before we go too far down that road." "You'll want to run your initial code through the adaptive intrusion emulator first," I said. "Otherwise, the decoys you're embedding could get flagged as anomalies by your own AI safeguards, and the Pentagon will notice." Shannon blinked, impressed. "You've already thought that through." "I ran the protocol last week," I said. "Saw a few cracks." Eleanor sipped her wine, clearly amused. "She doesn't sleep." Shannon leaned in. "We're building the future here. We need people who aren't just sharp, but invested." Her eyes met mine again, and I knew what she meant. Not just invested in national security, but invested in the bridge between military systems and civilian implementation, between the code and the consequences. We talked late into the evening. By the time dessert arrived, Shannon had laid out a tentative vision for a new advisory board, one that would guide tech partnerships like Aegis across multiple agencies. "I want you on it," she said, looking directly at me. It took me a second to register the offer. "That's a big ask," I said. "It's also the right one," Eleanor added. "You're not just a liaison anymore. You're a translator between two worlds." Shannon nodded. "You've earned your seat at this table. Don't make us ask twice. On the ride back home, Eleanor glanced at me. What are you thinking? I'm thinking about 10 years ago, I said, and how none of this even seemed possible. She smiled, the kind of smile that saw your entire journey at once. That's the thing about choosing your own path. Eventually, it leads you exactly where you were meant to be. When I got home, I changed into pajamas, grabbed my laptop, and opened the email thread Shannon had just forwarded me. Subject line, Advisory Board Nominees, Military-Civilian Integration Strategy. I added a few notes, saved my draft, and clicked out. Then, almost without thinking, I opened a new tab and pulled up a blank email to my dad. Subject, dinner. Just us? I stared at the blinking cursor for a moment, then typed, Hey Dad, got some time next week? Thought we could grab dinner. Just you and me. Your schedule permitting, of course. Let me know. And no grand speeches, no military titles, just Natalie, and I hit send. 3 days later, we sat across from each other at a small family-run place in Georgetown. Brick walls, warm lighting, the kind of restaurant where no one wore badges or name tags. He looked older than I remembered, not just in years, but in awareness. Like something had finally shifted. I'm glad you reached out, he said, folding his napkin slowly. Me too, I replied. He took a sip of water, then exhaled. I used to think the military was for people who didn't know what else to do. I'll admit that. I thought you were running from something, but now I see you were running towards something. I didn't interrupt. I saw the way Shannon and her board looked at you, not as a token, not as some surprise prodigy, but as someone they rely on, someone who knows the terrain better than they do. It took a while to get here, I said softly. I missed most of that, he admitted. But I'm trying to catch up, I nodded. There's something else, he added. When the article came out about the launch, I got calls. Executives, partners. They weren't congratulating me on 30 years. They were asking if I knew you, if I'd raised the woman who pulled off the impossible under budget and ahead of schedule. I looked up surprised. Did you? He smiled, a little embarrassed. I told them the truth, that you made your own way, that I didn't always see it, but that I see it now. There it was. Recognition. No parade, no applause, just quiet truth, and it meant more than anything. We finished dinner with lighter conversation, childhood memories, stories I'd never heard before about his early days at Pinnacle. And when we stood to leave, he hugged me. Not a corporate handshake, not an awkward pat, a full, heartfelt hug. That night, I returned home, kicked off my shoes, and opened my laptop. My inbox had a dozen new emails, half of them marked urgent, but I ignored them for just a moment longer. Instead, I opened my notes app and typed a single line. Remember this feeling. Because it wasn't about vindication. It was about peace. Fall rolled into winter, and with it came the quiet rhythm of routine. Project Aegis was entering its final deployment stage, and I spent long days toggling between secure meetings at the Pentagon and remote consultations with the implementation teams at Pinnacle. But somewhere between system audits and satellite link tests, I noticed something strange happening. My family had started checking in, not out of obligation, but habit. My mom sent recipes, sometimes articles she thought I'd enjoy. They were usually about women in leadership or quirky cybersecurity headlines from mainstream news. It was her way of trying, and I appreciated it. My dad forwarded briefings with notes like, curious about your take on this. No pressure. No criticism, just curiosity. And Gregory? He surprised me the most. One Saturday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message from him. Got time to jump on a call? Struggling with something in our implementation timeline. Need your brain. I called him immediately. He laid out the issue. 2 protocols in the new user authentication schema were causing unexpected server loads. His internal team was scrambling to fix it without compromising access speed. Send me the framework, I said. I'll take a look. He did, and I did. And a few hours later, I sent him a fix that rerouted half the query load and reduced server lag by nearly 40%. Gregory's response? 3 words. You are magic. That was the moment I knew. Our relationship had shifted. We weren't competitors anymore, we were collaborators. A few days later, he called again. Not about work. Hey, he said, Tiffany's getting married. She wants you to be in the wedding. I blinked. Seriously? She said, and I quote, Natalie is the only one who didn't try to marry her off to a hedge fund manager in college. So yeah, you're in. I laughed. Tell her I'll wear the dress if it doesn't have ruffles. Deal. And then there was a pause. You know, he added, when you showed up at Pinnacle in that uniform, I was jealous. I waited. You had something I didn't. Not just authority, purpose. You knew exactly who you were, and I was still trying to be what everyone expected me to be. That's a lot to carry, I said gently. It is, he admitted, but I'm trying to figure out what's mine, not just what looks good on paper. That's all any of us can do, he exhaled. You're a good example of that. That call meant more than he knew. By December, the Pentagon held a formal recognition ceremony for Aegis Phase 1, a huge deal, attended by senior military brass, defense contractors, and congressional liaisons. Eleanor stood at the podium, delivering a keynote that balanced insight with strategic clarity like she always did. And then she said my name. Colonel Natalie Williams has been instrumental to the development, launch, and future trajectory of Aegis. Her leadership represents what modern military service can look like: technical brilliance, ethical command, and the ability to bridge military and civilian operations in a way few can. She didn't inherit that seat, she earned it. The applause was long and genuine. Later, as we posed for photographs, Shannon came up beside me. You ready for Phase 2? She asked. Born ready, I replied. Good, she said, because this one's going global. The weeks that followed blurred in a whirl of planning sessions and interagency coordination. But even amid the whirlwind, I found time for things I once considered luxuries, like brunch. My mother invited me one Sunday, her place. Just the two of us. She served cinnamon rolls and eggs with too much pepper. We ate in the sunroom. It was quiet, comfortable. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. I always thought we had to prepare our kids for the world, she said, but I didn't realize the world might need to prepare for our kids too. I looked up. You were never lost, Natalie. We just couldn't see where you were going. I smiled. I didn't always know either. She nodded. But you kept going. I had to, I said. That's the only way I knew how to find myself. She reached across the table and placed her hand over mine. I'm proud of you. I know I haven't said it enough. You're saying it now, I said, and that was enough. On Christmas morning, I hosted the family again. My place this time. The table was set with pine sprigs and little name cards I'd printed on a whim. We drank cider and exchanged gifts. There was laughter, real and warm, and not once did anyone mention corporate promotions or home equity loans. My dad gave me a custom-engraved compass, for the one who always knew where she was headed, even when we didn't. And in return, I gave him a framed version of my commission photo, not the original, but a reprint with a handwritten note at the bottom. You taught me how to work. I taught myself how to lead. Thanks for building the foundation. We stood in silence, each absorbing it in our own way. He didn't cry, but his hands trembled a little as he placed it in his lap. By the time New Year's rolled around, I had one last task to complete before the clock struck midnight. I opened my laptop and composed an email to Eleanor. Subject, gratitude. Ma'am, no agenda. No request. Just thank you for seeing me, for backing me, for holding the line when I needed space to find my voice. I hope to be that person for someone else someday. She replied in under a minute. Colonel, you already are. Happy New Year. And just like that, another chapter was closing, but the story still being written. The snow hadn't yet melted from the sidewalks in early February when I received a package in the mail. No return address, just my name in crisp block letters. Inside was a single object, a polished wooden plaque engraved with the official emblem of Cyber Command and the words, "For exceptional leadership and integration, COL Natalie Williams." Attached was a handwritten note. Your work is now the standard. Thank you for setting it. There was no signature, but I knew it came from the director himself. I stood still, holding that plaque, and let the weight of it settle over me. It wasn't about the award. It was about what it represented. A moment in history I had helped shape. Not from the sidelines, not as someone's assistant or hidden strategist, but as a decision maker, a leader, someone who had walked into a room no one expected her to be in and stayed. Later that week, I was invited to speak at a leadership symposium at West Point. The room was packed, cadets in uniform, instructors, guests, some wide-eyed, some skeptical, all curious. I stepped onto the stage in my full dress uniform. No nerves, no hesitation. I scanned the room and smiled. When I was your age, I began, I thought leadership meant being the loudest voice in the room. Then I thought it meant being the most prepared. Eventually, I realized leadership means knowing exactly who you are, even when the world tries to tell you otherwise. I paused. The silence leaned in. I've sat in rooms where no one expected me to speak. I've signed contracts people assumed I couldn't understand. I've led missions where I was the only woman and often the youngest. But I've also built bridges between institutions that never spoke the same language. I've turned silence into strategy, and I've learned that respect isn't something you wait for. It's something you carry with you, no matter who's watching. More silence. Then, applause. Not thunderous, not overwhelming, just steady, sincere. That was all I ever wanted. The months passed. Aegis Phase 2 launched across 6 allied nations. I transitioned to a joint appointment, splitting time between Cyber Command and an interagency advisory task force for digital defense. It was fast-paced, demanding, complicated, and I loved every second of it. One afternoon, during a break between briefings, I received a text from Gregory. "Got promoted, VP now, drinks on me if you're ever in town." I replied instantly. "Congratulations, I'm proud of you." "Took me long enough to catch up to my little sister," he wrote back. "Don't worry," I typed. "I'm not slowing down." Later that spring, I traveled home to Montana for a few days. Just to breathe, to walk the fields, to drive those long, winding roads I used to escape down in high school when I wasn't sure who I was yet. One evening, I pulled into my parents' driveway just as the sun was setting. The porch light flicked on. My father stood at the door, waving. When I stepped inside, I noticed something immediately. A new frame on the living room wall. My colonel commissioning photo, centered, lit by a soft overhead lamp. "Your mother thought it belonged here," he said, voice low. "She's right," I said. "We ate dinner at the same old table. The same chairs, the same cutlery from years ago. But something was different. The air wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm." "I still don't understand half of what you do," my father said, carving into a pork chop. "But I keep reading. I'm learning." "You don't have to understand everything," I replied. "Just knowing you're proud means more than I can say." He nodded. "I am. So is your mother. Even Gregory's been bragging about you. He gave a keynote last week, quoted one of your speeches. That made me laugh." "He quoted me?" "He did. Something about courage not always being loud." I remembered the line. I'd said it once to a junior officer during a rough deployment. "Good quote," I said. "Damn good daughter," he replied. We raised our glasses. That night, I sat outside on the back porch with a blanket around my shoulders, stars overhead, the cool hum of crickets filling the night air. I could see the mountains in the distance, the same ones I used to stare at when I thought I'd never escape. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app, typed one last message to myself. "You made it. And you never had to become someone else to get here." Then I hit save. To you watching this, yeah, you. If your journey looks different than the one your family envisioned, if you've ever sat at a table and felt invisible, dismissed, or undervalued, I want you to know something. You are not alone, and you are not less. There is no right path to becoming who you're meant to be. Just your path. And sometimes, walking it quietly and persistently is the loudest declaration of strength you'll ever make. So tell me, have you ever had your work or your worth overlooked? How did you reclaim your voice? Drop it in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this one spoke to you, even just a little, go ahead and hit that like button. Subscribe for more stories that remind us all. Our value doesn't need permission to exist. This is Natalie Williams, and this was my journey. Thank you for being part of it.